They make a ton of money off that, ton of money. We as humans like to think that we're not influenceable. We like to think that we make our own decisions. At the end of the day, we're not. We can be influenced fairly easy. Operational improvements are a big one for most companies. This is where Dell got its start. The reason Dell did so well for so long as a company is because we were able to eke 5 cents and 10 cents out of every step of the process, building servers, shipping servers, producing high quality laptops. So a lot of companies are applying this now. They want to be relentless in how they do manufacturing, how they do operations. And this is where data comes in. Being able to monitor manufacturing processes every single step of the way, especially in today's global supply chains, become hugely valuable. Apple's a prime example. Apple's gotten so good at their manufacturing process. You can order a laptop from them today. It will be shipped, custom built from China 4 days later. That is amazing. And at a competitive price. I mean, to be able to do that is because they deeply, deeply understand every step of their supplier process, the logistics of how they get things on a boat over to the United States, and how people buy so they can properly plan what inventory they need, what pre-build. So I mentioned this before, $3.50 to 50 cents. We're at a point in the big data market where a lot of organizations have started down this path. They deployed their first Hadoop cluster, they bought some software to run on top of it, they integrated all their data. They're not seeing any returns. This is causing a lot of companies to get disenchanted. And they ask themselves a couple of questions. Can we recover from this and do something else, or do we need to get out of this? Our advice is don't get out of it. You spent the capital, let's do something meaningful with it, but let's figure out why this project is failing. Well, what we've done is put together a standard model of the 4 inputs of how people are going to use a big data project and how we're going to manage it. So, as I mentioned before, skills are absolutely critical. If an organization goes out and decides to do a big data project and they don't send their employees to conferences, they don't send them to training, nothing good is going to come out of it. Employees have to think fundamentally differently in the big data space than they ever did with traditional IT systems. There's a level of creativity, a level of brainstorming that just has to be done to make sure that we're effectively deploying these systems. We want to train our staff, but we also want to augment them with outside perspectives. Technology. Technology is important, but it's not the end-all be-all. If our big data project starts with a new technology definition, we've already failed. The last thing we want to do is define our technology. Because what we want to do is we want to start with our use profile. All of the projects should start with who's going to consume this data. Is this because the executive's looking to make a better decision? Is this for our product managers to make a better decision? That consumption aspect is what tells us what tools we need to deploy, how we deploy them, what time frame we need, those sorts of things, and then back into the technology. And then measurement. This is another place where a lot of companies forget until the last minute that we have to measure this project somehow. We can't just buy a bunch of servers and hope that we're going to get return. We need to define a metric. And this is why most big data projects that are successful come out of the line of business. The vast majority of the big data projects that are successful are run by the chief marketing officer. And the reason for that is you can go to every organization, ask the CMO, what does customer churn cost you? And they'll be able to tell you every percentage of customer that turns over, what it costs that organization. So suddenly being able to lower customer churn by 1%, we know exactly what the number is, exactly what our target is. Same thing comes to HR. Employee turnover in some industries is ridiculously high. The retail sector, anytime you get to a retail type organization, turnover is high. The technology sector, turnover is high. Turnover can be good if you're trying to change the culture of your organization, but if you're trying to maintain successful operations, churn gets ridiculously expensive. Losing an employee at Dell is about a $15,000 to $20,000 cost, regardless of who it is. By the time we transfer them out of the company, deal with closing out of benefits, post a new job rec, go hire them, interview 6 candidates, it's a very expensive proposition. So a lot of companies are now moving towards better monitoring of their employees to identify those that are at risk of leaving the organization. Because yet again, it's an identifiable cost the HR department can track back to. The place where we also see huge returns on big data organizations is companies that are associated with logistics. Large retail organizations, yet again, the Walmarts, the Targets of the world. They have to be so focused on both the amount of product that they have and where it is, but also the cost of moving it around and highly optimized with doing that. The last thing they ever want to do is be out of something on the shelf, but it's just as bad to have 10 items sitting on a shelf for 3 weeks that people don't acquire. So logistical type organizations that are managing that, much better returns on big data than other projects. The teams that we tend to see the worst returns on big data projects, absolutely the IT departments. IT departments tend to deploy for technology for the sake of technology. It's not that it's a bad thing, but it's hard to measure, it's hard to quantify, and they tend to be cost takeout organizations, whereas marketing, sales, HR tend to be cost contribution organizations to the company. So IT tends to struggle. A lot of historical companies, if you look at companies that have been around for a long time, they struggle with big data just because they've had so many habits ingrained in the organization for so long. They're just not ready to take on these modern technologies. It goes back to the maturity curve before. It's not their company's not well run, it's they're just not ready to consume these new technologies yet. So why do we see some of these problems? Measurement we mentioned, starting with just the wrong baseline metric, wrong baseline numbers. Skills, fundamental mismatch. It's not that the IT staff and the other people in the organization can't learn these new modern technologies, but it takes a conscious effort. If you have people that are already working 40 hours a week, telling them to learn a new tool, not a recipe for success. It's got to be a conscious part of the organization to evolve and change and invest. Technology is another place where we see a failure. A lot of these modern big data technologies, they're not meant to replace anything that we have in our environment today. If we go into most customer accounts, we're going to see they've got Oracle databases running some sort of business systems. Then we go look at modern technologies like Hadoop and Cassandra. These new technologies are not meant to replace anything that's already there today. So when we go into these projects with a mindset of replacement rather than complementary, we've already set ourselves up for failure. It's a very different use for in the environment. There's also a mentality in a lot of organizations about acquisition cost and trying to lower acquisition cost. As with cars, as with widgets at Walmart, you get what you pay for. If your only metric that you're optimizing to is cost of acquisition, it's not going to work out well. You're going to get poor quality, you're going to get tools that don't work, you're going to get a mismatch between requirements and actual delivery. So we want to focus in on other more meaningful metrics. So these are some of the things that we send our CIOs away from when we do executive briefings. And really the important one is start small. When companies go into big data projects, when they look at investing in this space, we don't want to start with fixing the entire company. We want to start with small identifiable problems that we can manage and then execute to. At Dell, we did that with social media. We identified that we clearly wanted to understand what our customers are saying about us. Nothing else, just what they're saying about us. And we went after and solved that, and we have a wonderful tool in-house for doing that. We could have gone after that and said, let's fully understand what our customers are saying and automate all of our responses to support requests and make sure that salespeople automatically get notified when their customers are unhappy. The project probably would have failed at that point. But rather than that, over time we've added on capability. So we go into organizations, we tell them the same thing, start small. If you're a marketing organization, just focus on customer churn. If you're a sales organization, just focus on optimal layout of salespeople across your accounts. If you're a manufacturing organization, just focus on quality for one part, not everything in the supply chain. And then start with asking the business. The best conversations for big data start with when you go to the CMO and say, what 5 things do you look at every single morning when you're having your cup of coffee? And then start from there with any project. Because that way it's something identifiable people can understand and relate to. This is an example of our projects that we roll out when we do these sorts of definitions for big data projects. And we end up defining things by 2 workflows. We define by user and access. So we always have a team of consultants, or one, that's focusing on how are people going to use these big data environments? How are we going to architect them? How are we going to do project plans? Now we always have a separate workflow around data. And yet again, this goes back to the 3 tiers earlier: analytics, data integration, data infrastructure. We want to architect each of those independently. They slide separately. They have requirements on one another, but from a project perspective, we want to treat them as independent entities. So, use cases. This is the big term right now. Everyone says, what's your use case when you're talking about big data products? Customers want proof points. When we're talking about these products in front of our customers, they want a proof point. They want an identifiable project that we execute on that worked out properly. They want to know what the return on was. So they can try to connect it to how their business operates. And these vary wildly by vertical, by industry. And this is one of the reasons when we talk to customers about big data projects, we start with their specific industry. The maturity model that I put up earlier, we have about 12 more versions of that by specific industry. We have them for manufacturing, for retail, for sales, online advertisements, for federal intelligence, federal defense. And we have example projects at each of those maturity levels for that specific vertical. So it resonates very well with the individuals that are speaking in their industry terms rather than generic analytics and big data terms. So these are the four that I've mentioned a lot. Healthcare is probably the biggest one from a society perspective that we can have a big impact on. The healthcare world is fundamentally changing. 5-10 years ago, when you went to the doctor, they got paid per service. So the doctor wanted you to show up a lot. That's changing. In 5 years, most insurance providers will not pay for a visit. They will pay by the outcome. So if you show up at the doctor with an infection, a rash, they're only going to pay to treat it once. The insurance company is not going to pay because you had to go back 4, 5, 6 times because you didn't take your antibiotics, you drank something you were allergic to, went back to a high humidity environment when you got told not to do it. So healthcare environments are fundamentally changing how they interact with their patients. They're trying to get more automated so they better understand how their patients are behaving and what's the patient's propensity for coming back. Because the doctors are not going to have the incentives forever for people coming back on a regular basis. So they're looking at information about how do you take your medication, how often do you travel, those sorts of things, and engaging with their patients more proactively. We have a couple of hospitals in Austin right now that are doing a trial with their patients. They actually send you a text message every day to remind you to take whatever medication you're on. The rates of people showing up and getting readmitted significantly lower with just that simple reminder. It's irritating as heck as a patient, but saves costs for everybody. The federal market's another one where data has truly been used for a lot of good things. There's things that are used that are bad that we don't want to talk about. But from a data access perspective, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the government space. One of them is the Open Government Initiative. Cities like Austin, New York, Chicago have done a lot to put data online and make it available. Cities like New York are really leading the way in identifying areas of high risk in the city so that fire inspectors, safety inspectors, police can be deployed more effectively. It lowers crime rates. It increases the safety of the population. So a lot of state level agencies are doing this, managing their data better, making it available to the populace to analyze as well. And then the marketing space that I mentioned quite a bit. Marketing tends to be the de facto standard yet, just because anytime we can get a consumer to buy another widget, there's a clear impact. A bunch of use cases across the federal space, marketing. So ultimately the two high-end, the most popular use case in the marketing are the customer 360 and the product 360. These are kind of the overarching use cases for everything else we want to do. Customer 360 is just that, completely understanding your customer base, what causes them to buy, what causes them to leave, so we can influence that in the right way. Starbucks is,
You're going to get a virus scan.
We don't want to do that. Yeah, it'll slow down. Yeah. Starbucks is doing a bunch of projects around providing coupons to people electronically based on buying patterns. They've been doing it for a long time. If you notice, you go to Starbucks in the morning, they give you a drink coupon for the afternoon. They want to take that electronic, make it more automated. Auto manufacturers, every single automotive manufacturer is doing this right now to better understand their customer, how they use their product, how they engage with it, because there's a brand ownership, particularly in the automotive space. Most people, they associate with a car brand. They're a BMW guy, they're a Mercedes gal. The car companies want to make sure that sticks. They want to make sure they understand why people associate with that brand and continue to build up on top of that. And there's the competitive 360.